Really looking forward to hearing from some of our elders and the wisdom of our elders around these ideas for what's possible for our future. And so just want to thank you all for coming here. I'm going to bring up Ryan, who's going to share a little bit. And I just want to thank you all. So.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to everybody for coming this afternoon. My name is Ryan McMahon. My language, my name is Vandamoshun Wabmakwa, which is a name that was given to me through ceremony. And the work that I do as a stand-up comic and as a writer, a commentator, a comedian, all centers on community. And the work that I choose to do through this is to engage with Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities to try to continue to bring these conversations forward. And so, when I'm introduced as a comedian, people sometimes expect jokes. But in order for me to get to the jokes, I got to get to the serious stuff first. And so, one of my favorite Native comedians ever was Charlie Hill. And Charlie Hill was Oneida from Wisconsin. And Charlie Hill, one of my favorite quotes of Charlie's was that he said, "Comedy is too important not to be taken seriously." And I just love that so much because I think comedy allows people, it disarms people. It allows people to relax. They don't have to be afraid of what's going to be said or what's going to happen. And but it also gives the people a chance to learn and to have access to these conversations in a fresh and fun way. So I take that responsibility as a storyteller very, very seriously. In the media work that I do, I've done a lot of television and film and radio, but I've really focused on building Indigenous platforms, so platforms for us to access on the internet to tell our own stories. And in this reconciliation project, in this era of what we are calling reconciliation, I think it's really important for Indigenous people to have our own spaces, to have what I call inside the circle conversations. So just circles for Indigenous people where we can kind of air out our dirty laundry and talk amongst ourselves. And then outside the circle conversations where we can sit together like this and welcome everybody into the space to have an open and honest sharing space. And that's what I do through the media work that I do. I have a show called Red Man Laughing, which I've been producing for over 5 years now. And my show this season, our 5th season, has been entirely dedicated to investigating reconciliation. And currently we have close to 40,000 people around the world listening to our show each and every week. And what the show is me sitting down with people, grassroots people, elders, politicians, academics, youth, and all kinds of people in between to sit down and talk about reconciliation. The most profound thing that has happened through this whole process of investigating what we mean when we talk about reconciliation have been some of the things that I've heard over and over again every single episode that we've produced. Every episode we've talked about love. We need to live from a place of love again. One of the fallouts from residential school, one of the things that has happened by design, and we know this to be true, was we took children from their homes and we put them away from their families. And it's really deeply affected the roots of our families. It's deeply affected the way we experience our relationships and our kinship, which bleeds into the way we govern ourselves or don't govern ourselves, which bleeds into our laws, into us inheriting these ugly pieces of colonialism, right? And so looking at family and love has been a major theme throughout this season of my podcast. The second theme that keeps coming up time and time again, everyone I talk to says the same thing. Indigenous people, we have to remember to give. We have to remember that spirit of giving that so many of our cultures across Turtle Island, whether you are here in Coast Salish territory or in Mi'kmaq territory or Dene territory in the north, we all have this spirit of giving. And my grandmother used to say, now don't get mad at me if you're non-Indigenous, but my grandmother used to say, what would happen when you go to an Indian's house at supper time? And I said, I don't know. She goes, well, the Indian would invite you in, give you a plate. You'd sit down, you'd eat with the people. What would happen if you go to a white man's house at dinner? You knock on the door. That white man would tell you to come home or come back after dinner. And it's a bit of a worldview thing. It's a bit of a worldview thing. And take it for what it is. Partially a joke, but my grandmother meant it. And that's how she taught, real plain. And so that spirit of giving, if you look at the potlatch, a governance system inside of itself, if you look at the giveaway for us as Anishinaabe people, again, another governance system inside of itself. That spirit of giving is something that has come up every single episode with everybody that I've talked to. And the third and final thing that has come up every single episode, and maybe this is the most important part, is land. Land. And so when we talk about reconciliation, what we're talking about is being nice to Native people, right? In Canada, what we're saying is, hey, just be nice to the natives, right? Like we've said, sorry, so now it's time to be nice to them. Don't be racist. Just be nice. We'll accept them. Now it's time to accept natives. And fundamentally, of course, that line of thinking is flawed. And we have to go much, much, much deeper in our thought. And I think that that's where this path is taking us, is we're starting to discover the challenge that we've inherited. And I get brought over all over North America to talk about our findings in Red Man Laughing, what we've talked about so far during this investigation. And the most profound part that comes up time and time again is the question of land. And how can there be reconciliation when every time I leave my house, I'm reminded of what we've lost? In my territory, we are big on the numbered treaties 1 to 11. I come from Treaty 3 territory. And so when we talk about the settlement of Canada and how Canada came to be a country, we always talk about these numbered treaties. And the treaties are they're supposed to be the great equalizer. They were supposed to be the thing that created this country that we call Canada. But you can argue, and we often do, that treaty has never been lived up to by the Crown. That treaty has always been broken since the signing of treaty. Before the ink even dried on Treaty 3, they had opened over 15 residential schools just in northwestern Ontario. Before Treaty 3 even dried, residential schools were open. And so the spirit and intent of that relationship between Indigenous communities and Canada is very contentious. And so the first step, I think, has been the acknowledgement of what has happened, 2008. Prime Minister Harper apologized. The second step, of course, is the gifting from residential school survivors themselves, the gifting to Canada, the TRC, because let's not forget, residential school survivors are the ones that demanded a TRC process. So that's the second step. The third step, of course, now their TRC mandate is complete. They finished their work. They've published 94 calls to action. They've published all of the reports. They've put all of the materials together in these thousands of pages. And here we sit. And there is no right way to participate in reconciliation. There is no wrong way to participate in reconciliation. Each and every day, we are determining what reconciliation is, what it means, what it looks like, what it feels like. And so you can look at that two ways. That can be a good thing or a bad thing, because we are going to make mistakes. We are going to find our successes. We are going to create best practices. We are going to find good ways to work with each other inside of communities, but it's going to take a lot of work. I think the most challenging part for Indigenous communities is to work on this reconciliation project at their own speed. Yeah? Because what we're seeing is a lot of academic institutions, universities. We're seeing a lot of church groups. We're seeing a lot of nonprofits. We're seeing some corporations. We're seeing governments wanting to ram this reconciliation agenda forward, right? We want to get to reconciliation as though it's a destination, but it's not. Reconciliation will not be a destination to where we arrive, but it will be the spirit in which we live. And so finding a way to get to that spirit, finding a way to live in that spirit each and every day, where Indigenous people have the right to live, in our language we call it Minoba-Maksiziwin. To live Minoba-Maksiziwin is going to take us a while. So, for me, the biggest challenge for Indigenous communities is finding a way that we can work on that in our own speed. I come from a long line of residential school survivors. My parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. I grew up in a household where there was abuse and where there was violence. My parents went to rehab when I was 9. I share a common story with probably many people in this room around the experience or the shared experience of residential school. But to me, what's really, really important about where we are today is that we get to determine how much of the past we actually pass on to the next generation. So what kind of discussions and what kind of dialogue should we be having with Indigenous youth and non-Indigenous youth? What are the types of conversations we can have that are both constructive but also critical? What kind of conversations can we have that really centers the health and well-being of Indigenous people without turning our allies off, right? Because there's still a lot of people that carry that pain. Still a lot of people that are very angry. Still a lot of people that don't accept what the TRC did. Still a lot of people that are not ready to even utter the word reconciliation. There's still a lot of people that really do want to reconcile and want to drop that weight of the past in order to move forward. And so we're in this time, like Casilam said, we've never been here before. And even just a few years ago, we didn't even know we were going to be here. We didn't even know that we were going to be taking on this reconciliation project. We had no idea. And here we sit. I'm a father. I've got 2 little girls. They're in the van, so I do have to get going here real quick. But I've got to determine, the types of conversations I have with them. I've got to determine what I share with them in terms of my own family's history. I have to work on that each and every day. And so much of this reconciliation work is focused outwards. And when I first started season 5 of my podcast, of my show, the very first episode of season 5 of my show is a very angry rant where I just go on a tirade about basically the ball being in Canada's court. And I say to Canadians, because there's almost 40,000 people that listen to my show every week, I say to Canadians, you tell me what reconciliation will be. You show me, right? You show me. Don't ask me to give my opinion. Don't ask Indigenous people to do more work for you. You show me. And I go on this big 20-minute, I thought I was smart, right? Oh man, I thought I was funny. I thought it was just bang on the money. I put it on the internet. I felt good. Oh yes, this is my statement on reconciliation. And now, having taken this project on for the last 8 months, and having sat with people all across North America talking about reconciliation, deepening my understanding of what our elders actually want, and I wish I could take that off the internet. I wish I could take it down. Because reconciliation is it's not going to happen out there. It's not something out there. It's not something they are doing. It's not something someone else will do. It's actually something you have to engage with. It is going to be personal, so up to you. It's going to be up to your family. It's going to be up to your community. It's going to be up to this country. And so it is something that is deeply personal, that is going to mean something completely different for everyone in this room. And in a couple minutes, we'll get to dialoguing about just what that might look like for yourself. Before we do that, I want to share a couple of quick stories that were given to me through our shaking tent ceremonies back home. And these stories, when they were given to me, they came to me in the way of a dream. And when we dream these stories, when we dream stories, we have to take them to what is called the J-scan. And the J-scan is what it is, a shaking tent ceremony. And to go to the J-scan and to get direction is a pretty serious deal. So you have to be sure that you mean it when you ask the shaking tent to give you direction. And the first dream that I had was about the treaty that Anishinaabe people made with the land and with the Creator. Because reconciliation can be between people, and that's, I think, a really important form of reconciliation. But reconciliation is also about the reconciliation that we make ourselves with the land, with our home territories where we come from. So, back a long time ago, the blueberries used to grow on the tops of trees. And the blueberries back a long time ago used to grow one by one on the tops of trees. And it was very hard for Anishinaabe people to climb to the tops of these trees and to pick that medicine, one blueberry by one blueberry. It would take them forever to get the types of medicine and gathering that they would need to feed the village. And Anishinaabe people were hungry and they were tired. And this came at a time where Anishinaabe forgot their original instructions, because all Indigenous people on this planet have been given a set of original instructions. And those original instructions were our governance systems, our languages, our laws, all of the things that pre-existed Canada. And Anishinaabe people were hungry, and they had forgotten their original instructions, and they started to starve. And they would lay at night under the stars, staring up at the blueberries, just wishing they could have them. And one young man remembered tobacco. And for us as Anishinaabe people, we use tobacco, a se'ama. We use a se'ama to pray. And that young Anishinaabe person, he grabbed his se'ama and he looked up at the blueberries and he started to sing. See, there's a song for every medicine. Our relationship to the land, there is no mistakes. There is no coincidence. Our relationship to all of the medicines, the plants, the animals, the water, the wind, the air, the fire, it is all a treaty. It's a gift that has been given to us by Pt01 himself. And the responsibilities of Indigenous people in their home territories, those things have been negotiated since time immemorial. And as that young man started to sing that blueberry song, Pt01 looked down and he heard it. And he looked over to see what was happening, and he saw one young Anishinaabe man holding tobacco, singing that song. The Creator stopped the song. He said, "What are you doing, young man?" And that young Anishinaabe told Pt01, "I see the berry, minikag." That's the word for blueberry in our language, minikag. And he said, "And I need that medicine. Our people are sick. Our people are dying. And we need that medicine, Creator." Creator said, "Your people have forgotten their way. And when the people have forgotten their way, they get sick. And when the people have forgotten their way, they will die. We made a deal." And that young man started to sing louder because he was desperate, because he didn't know what else to do. And he sang louder and louder until the Creator came back. And the young man begged. He said, "Creator, if you could please Bring these blueberries down from the tops of the trees just a little bit lower so that we don't get so tired climbing the trees to pick the medicine, so that when we pick the medicine, we'll have enough to feed the people. The Creator saw this young man was crying. The Creator acknowledged the tobacco, and even the Creator, and all of his ancient wisdom and glory, is not perfect. And the Creator had to remember the relationship and the treaty that Anishinaabe people have made with that tobacco and with him. And because that young man was holding tobacco, the Creator granted his wish. And he said, I will bring the blueberries down. In fact, I'll do you one better, Anishinaabe. I'll put the blueberries down on the ground, but I'll put them in a bushel. I'll put them in one bush, so that when you walk up to the blueberry bush, you can put your hand in the bush and pick enough to feed the whole village. Now, Anishinaabe got excited. We love blueberries. Pancakes? Right? Am I right? Oh my God, pancakes. Chubby guy. But as soon as the Creator said he would lower those blueberries down onto the ground for Anishinaabe, we got excited. And Anishinaabe started rubbing his belly, going, oh, yeah! And Creator stopped me. So what are you doing? And Anishinaabe didn't hear because he was so excited that the blueberries were coming down. He was rubbing his belly and laughing manically. And Creator said, stop, Anishinaabe, what are you doing? And Anishinaabe was a little embarrassed. And he said, oh, nothing, Creator. I'm so excited that you're gifting us with that medicine. And the Creator had an idea. And he said, Anishinaabe, I can see that you really like that medicine. I can see you really like those blueberries. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a brother bear. And he called on the Bear Clan people. Makwando dem! And the Bear Clan people came forward. And that's when the Creator called on the Bear Clan people to be the protectors of the medicine. And in that relationship and that treaty for us as Anishinaabe people, that's how we understand our clan roles. That's how we understand our governance roles. That's how we understand our relationship to the land and to the animals. You see, because to this day, when you go out to pick blueberries and you pick too much, you are almost always guaranteed to see a bear. Now, there are 4 stories that accompany that one. And in that story, when we tell it, there are a number of different ways that it can be told, in the language, of course, in a story cycle with the other 4 stories. But in telling that story very briefly here this afternoon, what I want to point to is the work that we have to do to rebuild our communities. You see, that story is told in a lodge in the wintertime back home. And it's a lodge story that is told to people to remind ourselves of our own governance systems, to remind ourselves of the law that we are actually supposed to have with and on the land. And so that, for me, when I think about reconciliation, is one of the most important questions that I can ask, is how do we as Indigenous people, no matter what nation or territory you come from, how can we re-strengthen and revitalize our connection to both those laws, that governance, that land, but also the responsibility that comes with it through language. Because on the land, in that ceremony, when you pick blueberries, there's a root, the blueberry root. It's a cancer medicine. And if you've ever dug a blueberry bush out of the ground, it takes a lot of work. My father had cancer about 4.5 years ago, and I was instructed to go and dig a blueberry bush out of the ground. And I did. It took me about 8 days to dig that blueberry bush and not destroy any of the roots. And as I dug the tree out of the ground, there were bears everywhere, all over the place. And I'm a big guy, but I cry when I'm scared. And, but I'm out there trying to help my dad. I'm out there because I've been instructed to do something. I've accepted the responsibility that I was asked to take this bush. And as I dug around those roots, I could hear the songs. I've never been given that blueberry song, but I heard it. I heard it while I was sitting on the land. I heard it while I was digging and working with that bush. And every day that I approached that bush to continue to dig it out, I brought offerings and I brought gifts for that tree. And when I finally got the tree out, when I brought the bush back to the medicine man and the medicine woman that was there, I gave it to them and they showed me. And there's one tip. There's one tip of the blueberry bush, grows right dead center of the bush. And it's about 3 inches long. And that's what they use. They grind it up for cancer medicine. There's other medicines on the blueberry bush as well, in the roots. But they grind up that one tip. And I don't know how I had this dream or why I had this dream. I don't know why my dad got sick. I don't know how I was instructed to go out and pick the medicine. But I learned so much about our instructions, about the way we are supposed to live. And it doesn't necessarily involve, getting high-ranking jobs with the federal government or provincial government. It's not about being on television. It's not about university degrees, though those are pretty cool. It is directly relational to land and ourselves. And this whole project around the Indian Act, the whole project around colonization, has all been centered on removing Native people from the land. It was always about land. Always. What is our response to Attawapiskat? Move them! Get them out of there! Bring them down! They can't survive up there. What is our response to Lalash in Saskatchewan? Move them! Remote northern communities, we got to get them. So it's still about the removal of Native people from the land. It's always been about that. So reconciliation, for me, the movement towards reconciliation in our own communities is going to be about getting young people and elders back out onto that land. It is about bringing young people and elders together to speak the language, to hear the stories, to sing the songs, to be reminded of our original instructions. Because without our original instructions, we die. Without our own prayers, without our own songs, without our own laws, our own governance systems, how can we call ourselves Anishinaabe? And so in our first breakout group, my first question to everybody, and what we're going to do is we're going to get into small little circle groups. I'm going to ask you what it means to be Indigenous. I know we have some non-Native people here, but I'm going to ask you what it means to come from your nation. So if you are, let's say you're Stalo, let's say you are Cree, say you're Dene, what does it mean? Because one big philosophical debate that I have with myself all the time, I'm trying to relearn my language. My grandmother didn't teach us our language. My mother didn't teach us our language. So my big emergency is trying to learn more and more of the language every day. But philosophically, right, can I call myself Anishinaabe if I don't speak Anishinaabe? Can I call myself Anishinaabe if I don't speak my language? I don't know. I think so.